From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. Official results in South Africa are showing the ruling African National Congress has taken an early lead in the general election. The Election Commission put the ANC ahead with 55% of the votes, with the Democratic Alliance trailing behind with a distant 26%. The economic freedom fighters so far have taken 8% of the votes. Just over a fifth of the voting stations have been tallied, and an official winner is expected to be declared on Saturday. The Electoral Commission revealed that there was a 65% voter turnout for this election, 10 points down from the last election. Around 26 million people were registered to cast their ballots at more than 22,000 polling stations. And for the most part, voting went off without problems, but police in Cape Province used rubber bullets and tear gas to disperse residents who attempted to disrupt the polls. It started when people who were boycotting the elections tried to prevent others from voting. In spite of this, the Institute for Security Studies predicted less violence at voting stations compared to the 2014 general elections. President Cyril Ramaphosa also reflected on that election, saying he felt the same excitement amongst voters.
This is a vote that reminds us of 1994, because in 1994 our people were just as excited as this, because they were heralding a new period, a new future for our country. And today, this is what I am also picking up.
Our correspondent in Johannesburg, Matuba Matlaji, has more in this report.
So, the most interesting part of the 2019 elections here in South Africa is underway, and that is the vote counting. And so far, about 35% of the vote has been counted, and the African National Congress is leading in 8 of the 9 provinces. The Western Cape is the Democratic Alliance's turf since 2009. The ANC hasn't governed that province since 2009 when President Jacob Zuma came into office. But now the Independent Electoral Commission says all the votes will continue to be trickling into the operations center in Pretoria, where all the numbers will be consolidated, and hopefully in the next 18 hours or so it will be clear who the winner of this election is, both on a parliamentary level and the provincial level. But so far, if polls are anything to go by, the people are saying that the African National Congress will be the winner of the election with under 60% of the vote, which will be a first for the African National Congress since the dawn of democracy. So it looks like they may not get the overwhelming majority they usually get in elections since 1994. Now, another issue that the Independent Electoral Commission will be dealing with today is complaints from political parties. Apparently, there have been complaints that has to do with vote counting and the ink that's been used to show that people have voted, among issues that political parties have raised with the IEC. But the IEC has said that the integrity of the election remains intact. This does not influence the vote counting that's currently underway, but it will meet with political parties on Thursday, and we'll give a report back on how will the complaints be resolved. But so far, vote counting continues with the African National Congress in the lead with just over 35% of the vote being counted. So updates will be coming throughout the day to see how other parties like the Democratic Alliance and the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters, are doing today. And lots of surprises are coming from smaller parties making strides in this very tough, heavily contested election. But we'll keep you posted on those. It's back to you, studio.
Thank you, Matuba. That was Matuba Matlaji from South Africa. Land reform, corruption and unemployment were key issues in this 6th national election since apartheid ended 25 years ago. Our special contributor Johan Abrams has more.
The rain came down in buckets in parts of Cape Town, South Africa this morning as people came out to vote in the national and provincial elections. Most of them saw it as a blessing on the 25 years since the first all-race democratic elections in April 1994. Ayanda Holo travelled more than 1,000 kilometers to vote in the town he grew up in. For him, it was a homecoming laced with nostalgia.
Nyanga East is not only a township and a location, but it's an institution that is filled with history and a clear contribution of sweat and tears and people sacrificing their lives to ensure that one day we enjoy a democratic vote and a democratic and a free society.
But Nyanga is also a town plagued by unemployment and rampant crime, and reflects the difficult road facing South Africa despite its great democracy. Paulo says if you look beyond the label of violence, it's also a place filled with hope. Those that came to vote share his optimism.
We have never ever given up hope, and we were fortunate enough because we do have a program at the Nyanga Arts Center which is called the Artisan School. The Artisan School teaches arts and culture as part of the curriculum in schools.
More than 26 million South Africans are registered to vote, and 48 political parties are contesting the elections. One of those that came to vote is still seeking justice for her brother that was killed shortly after his return from Robben Island.
We still have not found closure to the assassination of my late brother, Mziwonke Project. Since Pro's death, we were failed by a number of institutions, starting from the TRC.
Despite the hardships, residents of Nyanga, together with fellow South Africans, remain hopeful and continue to keep the dream alive of a better tomorrow. Johan Abrams for Talisur in Nyanga, Cape Town, South Africa.
In other news, Venezuela's Vice President of the National Assembly, Edgar Zambrano, was arrested in Caracas. The president of the National Constituent Assembly, Diosdado Cabello, made the announcement hours after the incident on Wednesday. Zambrano's arrest follows the NCA's decision to strip the immunity of 7 lawmakers who backed the April 30th attempted coup. Charges could be laid against them for conspiracy, treason, and rebellion. And Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has commented on Zambrano's arrest. He tweeted that those who favor foreign intervention, support violence, and stand in solidarity with the leaders of the attempted coup will be brought to justice under the country's constitution. On Wednesday, Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro accused the Colombian government of trying to instigate a military conflict between the two nations, despite the many internal conflicts that Colombia currently faces.
There is an ongoing war in Colombia between paramilitaries, guerrilla, and other forces. And yet, the government makes undefined accusations against us in order to justify a military conflict. Venezuela is the one being attacked by Colombia. On February 23rd, who tried to violate the Venezuelan sovereignty? Wasn't it Ivan Duque from the border bridge in Cúcuta? We had to resist the attack. They tried to force their way into the country with trucks full of products made for violence.
Maduro also said that U.S. citizens are increasingly supporting the Venezuelan government and that they reject any coup attempt against the country.
The U.S. government spreads racism, contempt, colonialism, imperialism. They spread the worst. But Mr. Mike Pence does not represent the honor and dignity of U.S. citizens, who every day are more and more supportive of the Bolivarian Revolution, and they reject the coup in our country driven by the U.S. government.
Venezuela's embassy in Washington, D.C. has been plunged into darkness after U.S. authorities cut power to the building. The embassy has been the location for a tense standoff between the Embassy Protection Collective and supporters of US-backed opposition lawmaker Juan Guaidó. As the situation escalated, one activist was arrested while others were injured trying to take food to protesters inside the building. Water was also shut off. More stories coming up. Stay with us.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Get your body. Tuesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. More than 4,000 public servants have gone on strike in Peru in protest against salary cuts. Workers employed under the National Identification and Marital Status Registry took to the streets on Wednesday in what they called an indefinite strike. They say the government could cut their salaries by up to 40% due to non-compliance with labor laws. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro has defended the decree he signed on Tuesday, loosening gun-carrying laws. Bolsonaro justified the decree, saying he has only given people what they voted for in the 2005 referendum. That vote was held to decide whether to ban the selling of guns in the country, which people voted against.
About carrying weapons, we can go above the law. We have done all we could do via decree yesterday. We are only fulfilling what the people voted for in the 2005 referendum.
A Brazilian court has ordered that former President Michel Temer be taken back to prison. According to local media, several judges of a regional court ordered that Temer and former coroner João Batista be returned to jail. The former president was arrested on March 21st for money laundering and corruption accusations due to the Odebrecht corruption investigation. A report titled "The X-Ray of Corruption in Colombia" has been presented at the Javeriana University in Bogotá. It's based on journalistic reports between January 2016 and July 2018, and it shows how the country lost billions of dollars due to corruption.
About $5.5 billion were lost due to corruption in Colombia between 2016 and 2018, as the government turned its back on the close to 12 million Colombian citizens who voted in the anti-corruption referendum in August 2018, which sought to make deep reforms to eliminate the phenomenon.
Unfortunately, we have not seen yet any results from the government or the Congress related to these laws to fight against corruption. Several of their proposals do not have any future and are not being discussed currently.
The public sector is mainly affected by corruption in the recruitment process by municipalities, but the private sector is also involved in these practices.
17.9 trillion in total, 8.5 trillion in the mining and energy sectors, 3.4 trillion in education, and 3.3 trillion in the health sector. That is a lot of money.
Cases such as Odebrecht are included in the report by the university in Bogotá. It includes practices such as bribes, contract manipulation, and money laundering in electoral campaigns. But corruption in the justice system is also becoming more and more clear.
It is corruption within the justice system. There is manipulation of judges who receive bribes, so they make this or that decision. Unfortunately, even the Supreme Court is involved in these cases.
Experts say the issue has to go beyond the entities of control and justice in order to get fair sentences for the corrupt.
It is important on the part of the citizenry, of course, to have effective control of the institutions that persecute corruption in Colombia. The problem is not the number of institutions that fight against corruption, but how these institutions are run. So it is important that citizens have both eyes on the problem, denouncing and monitoring the situation.
59% of the corruption cases affect fundamental rights, social, cultural and economic, and 39% of the cases are related to civil and political rights.
We now go to the U.S.-Mexico border, where nearly 100,000 migrants were arrested in April, the highest number in the past 6 months. According to data from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, there were almost 9,000 minors among those arrested. Over 460,000 migrants have been arrested since October 2018. This report comes 2 days after 700 migrants were arrested in the state of Arizona. 2 people were killed after a shooting during a demonstration in Mexico City. A man opened fire on a crowd of people who were holding a protest in the south of the capital. One of the victims was a labor union leader. 2 other demonstrators were also injured. The attacker was arrested shortly after opening fire. Mexican authorities are investigating the reasons behind the attack. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador says his government is making the fight against corruption a priority. The government launched a new plan to stop thieves from stealing medicine from public institutions, a crime that has hurt patients for years.
People who use public healthcare have been complaining about the continued lack of medical supplies and medicines in the clinics and public hospitals across Mexico.
I have to buy a very expensive medicine, but I need it, so I have to buy it, even though my health insurance does not cover it.
In an attempt to figure out the real size of the problem and who is most affected, social organizations have created the platform No to the Stealing of Medicine. Their goal is to identify those responsible for the shortage and the corruption networks that have benefited from it over the years.
According to a 2016 national survey about public health insurance, 24% of the people do not have enough medicine.
The president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, decided to concentrate all government purchases in the finance ministry, including medicines, for the entire health sector. That measure has caused shortages of some medicines due to the delay in the bidding process.
There was a delay in the purchase of medicines because they were trying to get a better price. Unfortunately, more than 97,000 people had real problems due to the shortage. For instance, our comrades in Tamaulipas are currently without antiretrovirals, and in Ciudad Juárez, people are receiving medicines only for 10 days.
The measure was useful to eliminate corruption, according to the president, who assured that the supply is guaranteed.
We have signed an accord with the UN to accompany us in all our medicines purchases, but at the same time, all the companies that sold us medicines are so ingrained in the country that it is difficult to find other ones. For instance, one of these companies is the only one that supplies us medicine for HIV, so I had to make an exception with that one. But we are looking for other companies to work with around the world.
According to a government audit, the health system is one of the most susceptible to embezzlement. The government of former President Enrique Peña Nieto had irregularities of more than $166 million.
In Paraguay, close to 40,000 people have been affected by floods. According to authorities, more than 10,000 people were evacuated just in the capital, Asunción. Heavy rains have been affecting the country since March, forcing security services to move people to higher ground.
It is a sad way to live. The entire time the government treats us as if we're animals. I say that if the government had put its pants on, we wouldn't be like this, forced out of our homes due to flooding. If they had defended the coast and protected the riverbank, we would be in our homes.
Public doctors in Paraguay are protesting for a decent pension. Doctors asked the government to enact the retirement law, which was approved by Congress last Thursday. Protesters demand the improvement of labor conditions, including the option to retire following 30 years of services, and from the age of 60, with a pension meeting 100% of their salaries.
We are claiming with strength and real belief what is our right. The medical sector has been ignored for decades, and they are demanding that we work until we die. The current pension system obliges us to work and contribute for 40 years, when the average doctor is dying at 60. We have to reach the age of 84 to get a pension.
People in Belize have voted in a referendum on the decades-old territorial dispute with Guatemala. Voters are to decide whether Belize should take its border dispute with its Central American neighbor to the International Court of Justice. The territory of Belize has been claimed in whole or in part by Guatemala since 1821 during the colonial era. While there have been several attempts to settle this dispute with no final resolution, several problems both on the land and sea still exist. We'll take one last break. Don't go away.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The death toll for the bomb which exploded outside a major Sufi shrine in Lahore, Pakistan, has climbed to 10. Authorities say 5 police officers are among the dead, as a police van was the prime target. Officers have described the blast as a suicide attack. The responsibility for the explosion has been claimed by the Hizbul Ahrar, a local Taliban group.
We were going from here. As we crossed the road, a blast took place in front of us, and a piece of meat fell in front of us. We ran up towards the metro station. They asked us to rush, otherwise the metro might be closed. The blast sounded so big that we felt like our ears will burst.
The House of Representatives in the United States have voted to hold Attorney General William Barr in contempt of Congress. Barr refused to hand over an unredacted copy of the Robert Mueller report on possible Russian interference in the 2016 presidential elections. It also follows rising tensions between Congress and the White House. Earlier on Wednesday, the White House invoked executive privilege to block the House Judiciary Committee's request for the full report. Hours later, the House Intelligence Committee subpoenaed Barr for the report.
Mr. Gomer?
The U.S. plans to implement a hefty increase in tariffs on Chinese products to take effect on Friday. Experts say this is a sign of President Donald Trump's frustration over a deadlock in trade negotiations. Beijing has responded, calling for an immediate end to U.S. retaliatory measures on trade. Financial analyst Chris Kruger told Bloomberg that China is likely to have seen Trump's tweets as both provocative and insulting. China is once again calling on countries to respect the basic principles of the UN Charter in any move to resolve the situation in Venezuela. In a press conference on Wednesday, China's foreign ministry spokesman said that Venezuela's internal affairs belong to its people and its government. Geng Shuang said his country will always defend political dialogue, free of sanctions and foreign meddling.
China is against a military intervention in Venezuela and against any behavior that might cause escalation or turmoil.
At least 12 people have been killed in the Democratic Republic of Congo after a clash between government troops and rebel forces. Most of the victims were from the Mai Mai militia. In response to the violence, the health ministry has issued an order suspending all the activities of Ebola response workers in the town until further notice.
For obvious security reasons, the United Nations Security Service has suspended all movements of personnel working in this area, where many people are currently deployed. Because, as you know, it's also an area, an epicenter also for the Ebola virus.
The World Health Organization says Libya's capital, Tripoli, is at risk of outbreaks of deadly diseases, including cholera. The organization says most displaced people are living in crowded places with poor sanitation and contaminated water. At least 60,000 people have fled the fighting between the UN-recognized government and the Libyan National Army in the southern outskirts.
These supplies can cater for 3 to 4 weeks or a month. But if there is no ceasefire and there is no reduction in the scale and scope and intensity of the conflict, even if it goes by the current intensity, these supplies will run out of, we will run out of these supplies.
And with that, we end our news brief. But remember, you can read more on these stories by going to our website, telesurenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, you can find us on Starsat channel 461 in South Africa and 539 in Nigeria. And you can join us on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.